Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into the really rich, sometimes complicated world of Egyptian cinema.
That's right.
We've got this fantastic critical analysis, basically a detailed history going back to the 50s, but we're really zeroing in on the big changes, the shifts that started right around the turn of the millennium.
Exactly. That's our focus today. Trying to understand this, this huge inflection point. Our goal is to unpack the major structural shifts, the thematic changes.
Right.
Look at that tension between, huge commercial hits and the really serious artistic critiques. And we'll highlight three specific films the research calls out as sort of foundational masterpieces of this newer era.
Okay, fantastic. Let's jump right in then. And we're starting, interestingly, not quite at 2000, but just before that, a real turning point.
Yeah, the sources really pinpoint 1998, specifically the release of Saidi Filmaymal Amrikeya, that's an Upper Egyptian at the American University. It was just this instant blockbuster, wasn't it? A huge cultural moment that kind of reset the box office rules. It absolutely did. And it brought in this this paradox that really defines the next decade or so. The critic we're looking at argues that technically, techniot, the quality shot way up.
Better cameras, sound, everything looks slicker.
Exactly. Digital cameras, better infrastructure. But, and this is the key thing, artistically, Alfani, there was this, noticeable decline in depth. Films look sharper, cleaner, but the stories often felt thinner, bit less substance maybe.
That's fascinating, isn't it? That decline in artistic weight. Why would better tech lead to, blander stories? You mentioned malls and globalization starting around then. How does fast food connect to filmmaking?
Well, it's because the audience itself fundamentally changed. Before 98, you had a much broader mix of people going to the cinema across different economic classes.
Right.
But post 98, Egypt saw this significant growth in the middle and upper middle class, right alongside these global market trends hitting. Suddenly you have these more affluent families becoming the really critical new demographic for cinemas.
And they're used to different standards, maybe, like the multiplex experience.
Precisely. They're taking their kids to see the big American 3D movies, the cartoons, in these new air-conditioned malls. So if they were going to watch an Egyptian film,
it had to fit that mold. It had to compete with Pixar, basically. Safe, nothing too challenging, nothing too political or violent, family-friendly.
you got it.
Yeah.
They wanted films the whole family could watch together. And this demand, this market pressure, it birthed what became known as cinema nansifa, clean cinema.
Ah, yes. Clean cinema.
It thrived on light comedy, easy-to-digest romance, maybe some light action. It made huge stars out of comedians like Muhammad Hannity and the late Alo Wali El-Din, and later action stars like Hamid El-Saka. Huge box office success, definitely. But it moved away from that really intense social realism Egyptian cinema was famous for.
Okay, so that commercial wave, the cinema nazifa, it clearly dominated the box office, made a lot of money. But the source argues that underneath that, or alongside it, really important, critically praised films were still being made.
Oh, absolutely. The artistic impulse didn't just vanish.
So let's dig into those. The analysis highlights three specific films as, essential masterpieces of this period. First one, Tilka al-Ayam, Those Days, came out in 2010.
Yes, and the author considers this, pretty much the single greatest Egyptian film made after 2000. It's structured around these pivotal moments, these crossroads, the source calls them milestones, in the lives of three main characters.
Crossroads, okay. And the title itself is significant.
Hugely significant. Tilka al-Ayam, it's actually a direct quote from the Quran, Surah Al-Imran, verse 140.
Okay.
And the essence of it is that time and fortune, they change hands, conditions aren't permanent, everything's in flux. And the entire film is built on that idea that people and their circumstances are constantly shifting. It gives it this real philosophical weight.
And the filmmaking itself reflected that depth, didn't it? The source talks about the script being incredibly efficient.
It really is.
Yeah.
Very little wasted dialogue. It leans heavily on visual storytelling. When characters do speak, it's very concise, very direct. The critique calls it Madoué Gidden, like extremely objective, to the point.
It's sewing, not telling.
Exactly. Instead of characters explaining everything, you get these incredible visual cues. The flashbacks are apparently very innovative, often no dialogue at all, just shifting maybe to black and white.
Oh, interesting.
Sometimes punctuated with just a sudden splash of red, maybe for violence or critical memory. Really creative stuff.
And that detail about the music. The score was by Abdo Dagger, the great musician, and it was his only film work. His debut and farewell all in one.
Yeah, isn't that something? It just adds another layer to the film's feeling of significance, of, capturing something unique and maybe finite. Like these days in the title are precious and passing.
Yeah.
A really profound piece.
Okay, wow. Now, the second film you mentioned, this sounds completely different. Bintain Men, Master Two Girls from Egypt, also 2010. This one shifts focus, right, to women's experiences.
Yes, completely. And here's where it gets really interesting, as you said. It tackles the experiences of middle and upper middle class women, voices that often felt marginalized, and the specific societal pressures they faced.
What kind of pressures are we talking about here, specifically in the, say, post-2009 context the film is set in?
Well, it's about the intense constraints imposed by conservative social values, particularly the idea that any relationship with the opposite sex outside of marriage is forbidden. So you have these educated, often ambitious young women
Right.
who feel professionally capable but completely stuck, romantically paralyzed. Their lives are kind of on hold, waiting for marriage.
And the script had a really powerful metaphor for that feeling, right? The display case.
The vitrina, yes. It's this central idea that the women feel like they're trapped behind glass, like objects in a shop window, polished, presentable, waiting for a suitable buyer, a husband, to come along and, appreciate them. But they're always just out of reach, or maybe time is running out. It's a really potent image of being stuck, just waiting.
Wow, yeah, that's a strong image. And the director, Mohammed Amin, used specific techniques to enhance that feeling.
He did. Things like shaky camera work to create a sense of unease, instability,
Hmm.
and also apparently very strategic use of backlight.
Backlight, how did that work?
It could give the characters this sort of halo effect in certain scenes, especially maybe when they're isolated or daydreaming, living in a fantasy. It emphasizes their kind of idealized yet detached state, almost dreamlike, but also separate.
Makes sense.
And then to tie this very personal struggle to something bigger, something national, the script uses the backdrop of the Al Salam 98 ferry disaster.
Oh, right, that terrible sinking in 2006. Hundreds died, mostly Egyptians traveling for work, wasn't it? How did the film connect that huge tragedy to these two women's lives?
It seems it drew a symbolic parallel. The feeling of being stranded, overlooked, the sense of waste, the waste of all those lives on the ferry, many just trying to make a living. It connected that to the perceived waste of potential in these young women's lives. Both were presented, subtly, as maybe systemic failures that left individuals isolated and adrift.
That's quite profound. Okay, so the third film, Wahed Sefer. That's 1-0 from 2009. The source calls this one crucial because it managed to weave together so many different complex issues.
Yeah, this one is incredibly ambitious. It's an ensemble film juggling, I think, 7 major characters and storylines.
7, wow.
And it all unfolds over just one single day, February 10th, 2008, which significantly was the day of the African Cup of Nations final match, which Egypt won. So you have this backdrop of massive national celebration.
Contrasting with individual struggles, maybe.
Exactly. While the country is euphoric, the film explores all this personal despair and complexity bubbling underneath. Religious issues, social frustrations, political anxieties, sexual repression. It's all in there.
That's a lot to handle in one film. How did the writer, Mariam Nayum, keep it all together, make it feel coherent?
Apparently, Nahum's script is just masterful in that regard. It keeps each of the 7 threads feeling human and distinct, even as they intersect and weave together. But maybe the bravest thing the film did, especially for 2009, before the revolution,
Yes.
was tackling really sensitive subjects head-on,
Yeah.
particularly the complexities around Christian personal status laws, the Isa Evan Walshak
Okay, for listeners maybe not familiar, why was discussing Isa Evan Walshak such a big deal back then?
Well, because for Christian citizens in Egypt, issues like getting a divorce or an annulment were often incredibly difficult, governed by very restrictive religious interpretations and councils. It could trap people in impossible legal and social situations for years.
So bringing that into a mainstream film.
Alongside things like police pressure, hints of state corruption, was really pushing boundaries pre-2011. It was very critical stuff. And notably, it was driven by an amazing team of women. Kamla Al-Buzekri directing, Nayum writing, Nancy Abdel Fattah as DP, Mona Raby editing. A real showcase.
Incredible. So these films, Tilka Alayam, Bintain Men Maser, Wahed Sef, represent this peak of intense, critical filmmaking around 2009-2010. But then 2011 happens, the revolution. And that, according to the source, kicks off a 5th major phase, changing the whole industry again. What happened?
Well, the change was pretty drastic, driven a lot by technology and economics. Suddenly, you had these really good, affordable digital cameras, widely available, digital Betacam, Canon 5Ds.
Right, things that made shooting much cheaper and faster.
Exactly, which meant producing television drama suddenly became way more feasible, much quicker, much less expensive than traditional film production.
And at the same time, streaming platforms started taking off.
Yes, you had Shahid, Watch It launching, Netflix entering the Middle East market more seriously, all roughly between, say, 2011 and 2018. This created this massive new demand and a profitable outlet for TV series.
Okay, so the tech got easier and the platforms created a huge appetite for content.
And that's where the money and, crucially, the talent started to flow. The biggest movie stars, the A-listers, they realized they could make, the equivalent of 4 or 5 feature film salaries
For just one TV series.
for one TV series. So why spend months on a potentially difficult, maybe artistically risky film when you can do a Ramadan series for vastly more money and maybe reach a bigger audience too?
That makes sense from their perspective, but it must have left a big hole in the cinema landscape.
It did. And that vacuum, particularly at the high-budget end, was largely filled by big genre pictures. Spectacle films, especially the street war or urban violence genre became huge. Think of the Well-Odd Risk films and their sequels. Massive hits.
Fun blockbusters, maybe, but not exactly the deep social commentary of Wahed Saf.
Generally, no. Great action, great entertainment for many, but a different kind of filmmaking. And this leads us to the final, really critical financial shift the source points to, something that raises questions about the future.
Which is?
The rise of major external funding, specifically large-scale production support coming from outside Egypt, with the Saudi Arabian big-time fund being a major example recently.
Okay, so foreign investment is bankrolling the biggest Egyptian films now. What's the concern there, according to the analysis?
Well, the capital is obviously welcome. It allows for bigger budgets, higher production values, maybe more international reach. That's the plus side.
But the potential downside?
The author raises a warning flag. If the most ambitious first-level Egyptian films are now primarily co-produced, maybe even driven by foreign entities and their priorities, does that dilute the uniquely Egyptian voice? Does it steer stories away from difficult local truths towards perhaps more regionally palatable or commercially safe themes? The concern is it might signal, sort of, the end of truly independent, top-tier Egyptian artistic production.
Right. So looking back at this whole post-millennium journey, it really is a story of tension, isn't it? That constant pull between commercial demands, the clean cinema, the big blockbusters, and that powerful artistic need to dig into the complexities, the uncomfortable truths of Egyptian society.
Absolutely. And now it seems like much of that tension, or at least the resources to explore it, has shifted towards television. Yeah. Driven by different economic models. Back in 2009, 2010, the most vital films were confronting internal issues, state power, religious constraints, social pressures.
But now, with the top stars largely working in TV and the biggest film budgets potentially tied to external agendas, it leaves you wondering. The source basically asks, who's left? Who will tell that distinctly Egyptian story with the same fearless, realistic eye that produced something like Wahed Saf?
It's a really important question. There's a beautiful quote in the analysis we used. Cinema is how you get to live more than one life. A new life with every film you watch. The question now is, if the vision behind the camera is increasingly shaped by business interests located outside that specific national conversation, does that new life the film offers still feel truly authentic? Does it reflect the lived reality it's portraying? That's the challenge, really, for the next wave of Egyptian filmmakers.
Definitely something to think about. We'll leave it there for this deep dive.